Melody and I have sold over 16,000 items on eBay. And get this, we've done that without ever, not one time, have we ever listed more than 25 items in one day. In this video, I want to talk to you about the often overwhelming feeling of running a business, work that never stops. There's an old rule, many of you have heard it, and I want to talk about how it applies here. It's called the Pareto principle. 80% of our profits come from 20% of our effort. The other 80% of our work goes to things that barely move the needle. So what Melody and I decided way back is that, well, let's just do the 20%. Let's just do the stuff that brings in the most bang for the buck. Over time, we've kind of narrowed that down into those things that really do make a massive difference when you're running a business. So whether you're just starting or you've been at this for a while, these are concepts that are worth looking at. One of the first ones you need to do is take a very hard look at how you're sourcing your items. I have been super guilty of buying everything. I'm picking up tons of $10 and $15 items because there's profit there. And a lot of that 80% of the work goes into those kind of things. And over time, Melody and I found out that every once in a while, we would sell an item for $100 or $200 or $300, sometimes $1,000. We would find those items and put the work into them, and bam, we made as much on those as we did days and days worth of work on other items. So instead of focusing on just listing faster, we focused on how can we source better. And while everyone around us was focusing on listing speed, we started focusing on how can we be amazing at sourcing? How can we bring in those items that fit that 20% rule? They're going to bring in most of our profit. And over time, we're pretty good at that. You need to focus on those items that you have that bring in the most value and replicate that process. We've been able to do that without drastically changing how much we spend. Certainly not when you look at the return on investment. Become a master of sourcing, far more important than becoming efficient at listing. It doesn't mean that listing, the process itself, is not important, but it does mean that when we're listing, we want to focus on those things that bring the most bang for the buck. And that is your title and your pictures. There's a ton of other things that go into a listing. A great description and making sure you got the correct item specifics and a lot of other things. But the things that get eyes on your listing and cause people to open it, it's a title without a bunch of extra goop in it. You've got 80 characters. You make them count. Those need to be things like the brand and the size and those things that are really relevant that people are going to be looking for. Putting things like, wow, super nice, rare. Those are not words that people are searching. They're not going to put more eyes on your item. A good, clear title that will correspond to and match up to a search that somebody's doing. And then the second part of that is really clear pictures. You would be shocked at the number of people that just look at the first picture when they're making a decision. They don't ever open it if that first picture isn't really clear. They don't ever go beyond it and find out what other pictures you have. They're not going to look at the last one with your measurements in it. They're not going to look at the flaws. They don't ever get past the first one. So your title, your photographs, especially that first one, that's where my bang for the buck is. Or the next part is still part of listing, but it's really important, and that's pricing and sell-through rate. You've got to have a balance between those two. If you pick up ultra rare items that never sell, like you're going to sell 1 or 2 a year, you're going to have a lot of items to have regular sales. So sell-through rate is important just for cash flow. And pricing as a component of sell-through rate is incredibly important. If I'm selling something that sells really well, and there's a few of them on there, but mine is the highest one, oftentimes it's going to still sit because others are coming up that are a correct price point. By the same token, I don't want to price it so low that it sells immediately, but I didn't bring in the profit that it was capable of bringing in. My time is too valuable to give the things away. So typically what I do, I find items with a good sell-through rate, and I price them just below the midpoint. I'm pricing mine to where it moves. It's not the cheapest, but I'm going to get that item out of the door so that I can bring the next one in. Most of my time has been spent with a very small number of customers, a very small number of customers. Let's talk about what to do to make that process as simple and effective as possible. Respond to important messages quickly, whether that's a return or an offer or something like that. Timeliness really does matter. You can avoid a lot of headaches and a lot of problems by just responding to people promptly. It sends them a signal that, hey, this is important to me and I want to get this resolved, or I want to get this answered. And that reduces questions and concerns later on. But the flip side of this is you also don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time explaining things. You can over-explain things and you can give a buyer far too much information. For example, if I get a return and I'm just going to tell them, hey, here's the return policy. Once you mail it back after this amount of time, then we'll promptly make a refund. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. For one, by not having a ton of detail, I can pretty much copy and paste my normal response to those kind of things, and it's very fast and efficient. And there's not a lot of things for them to question and pick apart later on if they're that kind of person. It was very much upfront and clear. Also, you can spend a lot of time here dealing with things that aren't going to benefit your business. They're not going to move the needle. When we talk about customer service, and I know you've all heard the phrase, don't let anybody live rent-free in your head. Look, sometimes things are going to go wrong and you're not going to be able to satisfy somebody. You do everything you can to take care of your customers, but at some point, you still have a business, you still have other customers, and it's okay to move on, and even if you don't like how they responded. But by not spending mental energy on them at this portion right here, you're just going to run a happier business. You're going to be happier, and they're still going to be unhappy where they're at. There are some time wasters that resellers, I think, are very guilty of. And let's talk about what those are, because that can pull you over into the 80% effort with a very low return. And one of that is over-analyzing your listings. We found an old sign one time. It was a mobile oil sign, one of the, a flange sign. It was very rare. You couldn't find the exact same one. Went ahead, took my pictures of it, listed it ridiculously high to cover myself and give myself some extra room, sold it within a few hours after several offers, and got a great amount for it. My listing probably wasn't perfect, but it got sold, very little effort. We can overanalyze things to the point that we didn't get the job done when we could have. Another one that I'm not a big fan of is if I have items that have sat for a long time, and they're not even things that I would buy anymore, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going back and trying to fix a bad listing, because sometimes it's not a bad listing, it's just a bad item. And I don't want to invest more valuable time into an item that isn't something I would even sell anymore. Another one that I'm telling you, I just don't spend a ton of time working on, and that is obsessing over every single eBay algorithm change. I'm not going to pick it to pieces. The target moves all the time. What sells moves all the time. What I'm able to find moves all the time. For me to worry about things that in the end don't impact that 20% of my time, it pulls a ton of energy towards something that's really truly beyond my control. And maybe if I react this way or that way, it will eventually have some benefit to it. But the reality of it is good items, good pictures, and good photos, good prices. I'm still going to sell stuff as long as the platform is up and running. I'm going to do the best doing just that. So step one, review your best-selling items. You can look back and think, man, that was fun. I bought it for this. I sold it for that. It sold this fast. Sold it. People were happy. Review what your best items are and focus your energy on repeating that. Not just bread and butter. I'm not a big believer in bread and butter sales. I want to focus on those things that check all the boxes for me. And I want to get better at that. And I'm going to tell you step two, cut the fluff. Focus on listing the items that are going to bring in the most profit, get them done, and make sure that those processes are fast and efficient without a ton of extra stuff. The extra stuff is not going to net you nearly as much as it costs you. And one of the places that you should focus some mental energy into is tracking what works, what inventory sources were the best, what shipping methods were the best. For example, for me, buying new boxes is a much better use of my time. I don't have the space for used boxes, and knowing what sizes I have here allows me to list faster and ship more safely because I know exactly what I've got. So for me in my business, that having boxes saves a ton of energy and time that isn't made up for however much I would save by not having by using reused boxes. If you find a process that is working, you double down in that area. That's where you put your effort. And by doing all of those things, we're going to spend less time on our businesses and be more profitable as a result, and quit worrying about the extra 20% you could gain by doing 80% more work. That's what we've done, and we've created a very nimble and efficient business that's provided everything that we need to provide without taking away our most valuable commodity, and that's time. That's it for this one. I appreciate you watching. I'm going to see you real soon on the next one. Bye.